go ahead and do some research on toxic masculinity, figure out where the toxic masculinity came from. As a matter of fact, you don't have to. I'll tell you, since you're bringing this up. Toxic masculinity was coined in prisons. And how this worked was when they did, what they've discovered is if you take prisoners and put them in extremely toxic, extremely male-driven situations, they become like that. They become just as violent. They become this and that. So now what we have done, we've taken that term that was coined as toxic masculinity and we're applying across the board to the entire society and applying that to men. So toxic masculinity is not what you think it is nowadays. It's kind of like misogyny, where you ask somebody to describe misogyny.
Just because
half of the people don't know what that means.
Just because something started one way doesn't mean that that's not how they're using it to define things now.
Well, again, misogyny, right? You understand what misogyny is, right? That's hatred or contempt towards women. However, if the guy says, you know what, I'm not going to date a girl that is, XYZ, that's being called as misogynist. But that is not being misogynist. That's hatred and contempt towards women. That's what the word misogyny means. Does anyone know what misandry means?
I don't understand why you were trying. I don't understand what you're trying to argue with his phrase.
Well, because he came out and he brought that up. The reason I'm arguing with him is he brought that up because he's trying to say that he understands what's going on and there's the 2023 this and that.
That's not what he said.
Well, that's
he said it earlier.
Yes.
No, but
say
right
that
now,
phrase.
what he said.
He said that the deletes were from a lot of toxic masculinity, telling these men they feel weak and useless.
Again, toxic masculinity is not what he's describing. Toxic masculinity, this was coined in prisons where men become extremely violent.
But you can't say toxic masculinity only happens in prisons. No, the toxic masculinity
term was coined in prisons.
Correct. But it means where men use dominance, violence, and control to assert their power and superiority.
Which was coined in prisons.
Coined in prisons, but doesn't mean it can't be used in
But
another...
it doesn't make it not a valid psychological term.
It's not.
It is.
It is not.
Just because it started somewhere doesn't mean that it's not shown in society. Just because they were able to see it somewhere does not mean that it's not seen in society.
In which part of society do you guys ever feel that you are in a extremely violent prison?
No, not in general, but there are men that are like that.
You don't have to be in a prison surrounded by 1,000 men to experience toxic masculinity. And if you believe that, you are wrong.
Toxic masculinity in itself, even seeing it in the prison, is saying that men are being shown and told and seeing.
But this happens that only in prisons in
it
extremely violent conditions.
It does not.
This is where the term came
Brother,
from.
you're looking
what
at
about the
men
came from there?
That
but
is not true.
It doesn't mean that it only applies there.
Okay, what about the men that are in the prison and around this environment and they turn into toxic masculine men and then they come out? You think they're going to change back? No.
Again, but
so now there's going to be toxic masculine men out there.
Again, we're forgetting one little thing. Yes, do these people exist 100%, and I will not say that they don't. However, on average, majority of the time, that is not the situation. That is not the case. On your day-to-day basis, when you're talking to guys, they're not being with you in a violent prison condition environment.
It's not only violence, it's being
dominant,
controlling, hostile, which is violent.
Okay, if a guy's being, in a sense, hostile, saying, well, you...
It's not just one thing. If it's dominant, it doesn't mean it's toxically masculine. If it's assertive, it doesn't mean toxically masculine. It's all of those things combined together are what toxically masculinity is. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not just one thing.
I think we have to cut it there.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not agreeing, so it ain't going anywhere.
That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. Like, the word is actually being used incorrectly.
Brother,
just like the word ignorant is being used incorrectly.
Brother, you take these phrases and want to define them only by the extreme.
How is that an extreme? That's literally the definition of the word.
That is not the definition of the word.
Wait, you just read it.
But you're talking to say only in prison. That's not the definition of the word.
That's where
brother.
this is
it
where
this
was coined.
Okay,
the phrase was coined from prison. Doesn't mean it was only happening in prisons where they found it.
I understand, and again, as I said before, does that?
I just
happen
think
in
I'm
real
just saying.
life?
I'm
Yes,
just saying.
It
You're
does,
you.
but it
I'm
doesn't
just saying
happen
you
at the rates
arguing
that
with
we
that
think
phrase
it
was
does.
bullshit.
That's what I'm saying.
Here's the thing, though. You're saying that because you are a man who was raised properly, who has never experienced that. But most women have experienced it at least once. At least once, where a guy is trying to assert their power by using their size, by using their voice, by being dominant, trying to assert power by using size, which would be intimidating, which would go to violence, right? Because if you're intimidated by it, it's because you're scared. And to make them stronger to show their power over you. All women have experienced that at some point in their life. So for you to say that it's not a normal day thing, it is for women. Just because you don't see it, because you're around men that don't.
You're missing the point. You're missing the point.
Your brother, you're missing the point.
No. I understand. I understand. Are there guys out there that are gonna come in and assert some sort of a, because they're trying to have you do something their way? Are they gonna do that?
If you look at toxic masculinity, what does that word say? The guy's using his masculine traits to be toxic. That's all that has to fucking mean, brother.
No, he doesn't, because you just read the definition.
I'm done.
Just read the definition.
No, you can't just get up and leave.